The movie we're talking about today is based on true events that took place in the 1980s, involving an adventurous young man named Yossi. After finishing his military service, Yossi decides to travel and explore new places he's never been to before. So, he chooses to head to South America. There, he meets a young guy around his age named Marcus. They decide to continue their journey together, and they start off with a camp in the jungle. Yossi spots a girl there and is immediately drawn to her. It seems the feeling is mutual. Marcus then reconnects with an old friend named Kevin, who happens to be a documentary filmmaker. Marcus introduces Yossi and Kevin, and the three of them agree to continue the journey together. Yossi spends time with the girl, and they talk about how his father always disapproved of his constant travels and adventures. This turns out to be their last day at the camp, so Yossi says goodbye to her and continues the journey with his friends to a nearby city. One day, while walking through the city streets, Yossi is approached by a local man named Carl. Carl introduces himself as a traveler and offers Yossi the opportunity to join him on a camp trip into the Amazon rainforest. Carl explains that the adventure will allow Yossi to explore untouched places, meet the indigenous tribes, and even find gold in the river running through the forest. Carl shows Yossi pictures from his previous trips, which fascinate Yossi. Yossi pitches the idea to his friends, but they initially resist since their trip is almost over. But Yossi manages to convince them to extend the journey and join him on this new adventure. Finally, they agree, and the group heads to the jungle. Yossi meets up with Carl again, telling him that he and his friends are in. They buy the necessary gear for the trip, and Carl advises them to leave their expensive watches and money behind because they don't know what might happen in the jungle. Yossi takes along a Bible that his uncle gave him before he died to protect him from evil. The adventure begins, and everyone is excited, especially Kevin, who sees this as a chance to capture rare photos that could land him a job with National Geographic. Yossi, on the other hand, is pumped about the gold in the river, while Marcus is just tagging along to avoid being left alone. Carl talks about the beauty of nature and how humanity is destroying the world with its own hands. At night, they set up camp in the jungle. Out of nowhere, Marcus screams in the middle of the night, scaring everyone awake. He explains that an insect was crawling on his face. Carl identifies it as a dangerous bug but downplays the situation, even laughing at Marcus and calling him a coward. The next day, Carl warns the group to pick up the pace because it's going to rain. Kevin makes fun of him, saying it's summer and it can't possibly rain. But sure enough, it starts pouring, just as Carl predicted, forcing them to set up another camp. The next morning, they're surprised to find Carl missing. Marcus panics, refusing to move forward until they find Carl. He starts yelling for Carl, despite his friends telling him that making so much noise might attract animals. Suddenly, they hear a rustling in the trees and a noise getting closer. It turns out to be a small indigenous man herding his cow. They ask him for directions to the nearest tribe, and he helps them out. They continue on and eventually find Carl standing on a hill near the tribe. Yossi confronts Carl about why he left them, and Carl explains that he wanted them to experience the adventure on their own. The tribe welcomes them with open arms, and they stay for a couple of days. Then, they decide to continue their journey and visit other tribes in the jungle. They camp by the river, where Yossi actually finds some gold. They also witness rare natural phenomena, just as Carl had promised, and Kevin takes photos. At one point, Carl spots a monkey and decides to hunt it for dinner. He shoots it down and kills it brutally, shocking the group. Carl roasts the monkey and invites them to eat. Kevin, who is starving, tries it first and says it tastes good. This encourages Yossi to try it too, but Marcus refuses to touch it. The next day, Marcus starts showing signs of extreme fatigue, so they take a break. Carl treats a wound on Marcus's foot, which had become severely injured from the constant walking in the jungle. The group decides to carry Marcus's gear for him, but they feel like he's slowing them down, which frustrates them. Marcus senses that his friends are distancing themselves from him, and he apologizes to Yossi. Yossi reassures him that nothing has changed and that they are still friends. But when Yossi walks away, Marcus breaks down in tears, feeling isolated from the group. The next day, the four gathered to discuss a solution for how to continue their journey with Marcus's injury. Kevin suggests they head back to the city and end the trip, but Carl argues that they've already come too far and that the next tribe is actually closer. However, Marcus wouldn't be able to walk that distance. Kevin then proposes they build a small raft and travel down the river to reach the tribe. Yossi and Marcus agree, but Carl becomes visibly anxious and refuses the idea. Since he's outvoted, they decide to go ahead with Kevin's plan. And indeed, they built the raft, and Carl had no choice but to help them. Before setting sail, Carl gave them instructions. They needed to stay in the middle of the river, and if the current got stronger, they should steer toward the shore, otherwise they might drown. They began their journey on the river, which was calm and smooth at first, but as time passed, the water current increased, causing the boat to lose its balance. Carl became anxious and gave them directions, but Kevin felt that Carl was trying to control them and didn't know what he was doing. They argued, and Yossi tried to break up the fight until they reached the shore safely before anyone got hurt. At the shore, Carl told them they would camp there and not continue sailing. He left them and walked off, and they started to suspect that Carl was afraid of the river because he couldn't swim. They searched for him in the forest, and suddenly, a shot was fired in their direction. Carl explained that he shot because he saw a jaguar approaching Yossi, so he was trying to save him. The next day, they prepared the boat to sail again, but Carl refused to continue the journey with them. He told them he would return to the city through the forest, and wouldn't take any more risks. However, Yossi and Kevin still wanted to complete their journey, so they decided to continue by river, leaving Marcus to return to the city with Carl. This was because Kevin didn't want Marcus to come along due to his injury slowing them down. Yossi agreed with Kevin and went to talk to Marcus, cleverly convincing him that it was better for him to return with Carl because Kevin was reckless and might get them lost, and someone needed to go back with Carl. Marcus became concerned about Kevin's behavior and asked Yossi if he could return to the city with Carl due to his health and injuries. Yossi pretended to agree and acted like he was sacrificing himself for Marcus, which made Marcus feel grateful and thank Yossi sincerely. Later, Kevin prepared the boat for the remainder of their journey, and Carl gave them some final advice: to avoid entering the canyon at all costs, and to try to stay in the middle of the river until they reached the tribe. He warned them that if the river current got any stronger, they should camp on the shore and avoid taking risks, as it could cost them their lives. Carl gave them the map they would follow. They divided the food equally, and they said their goodbyes, each continuing their journey in their own way. At first, the trip was peaceful because the river's current was calm, allowing them to cover a lot of distance in a short time. They agreed to take turns resting, with one of them steering the boat while the other slept. It was Yossi's turn to rest, so he slept while Kevin steered the boat. Suddenly, Kevin noticed the river current growing stronger. Before he could wake Yossi for help, the water movement increased so much that the boat lost balance. Both of them tried to steer the boat to shore and avoid the canyon, but the powerful current took control of the boat's movements until they crashed into a large rock in their path. They clung to the rock tightly, trying to avoid being swept away by the river's current. Kevin said he would swim to the shore to find a rope to help save them. Despite Yossi's fear, he felt reassured when Kevin promised he wouldn't leave him behind. As soon as Kevin made his way toward the shore, the current intensified, causing the boat to slip off the rock and Yossi to fall into the river with it. Kevin couldn't find Yossi. Yossi was carried away by the strong current, unable to swim or control his movements, until he reached the shore of the river. He managed to swim toward the shore and climbed onto a nearby hill, calling out for Kevin as loudly as he could, hoping he would hear him and come to rescue him, but there was no response. Exhausted, Yossi sat down to rest and fell asleep. When he woke up, he saw his bag floating in the river. He rushed to grab it, and found inside the Bible and the energy pills he got from Carl. He took one of the pills, which gave him enough energy to keep searching for Kevin. Yossi began moving through the forest, following the river and calling out for Kevin in every direction, but he received no answer and saw no sign of him anywhere, which frustrated him even more. He decided to draw a map of his movements, and leave it with his shirt on the hills so that Kevin could find him if he searched the same area. Yossi continued his journey, and 6 days passed. By then, his food had run out, and his energy was dwindling, so he decided to stop and camp under a tree for the night. As he slept, he dreamed of being in a restaurant, eating ravenously. He wakes up to the sound of someone calling him, and Yossi imagines that Marcus is standing in front of him, calling his name. When he shines his flashlight in that direction, he finds no one there. He senses movement in the nearby trees and spots a wild tiger approaching him. He uses the gas and fire he has to try and burn it, but as soon as he does, the place lights up, and he realizes it was all in his head. There's nothing around him. He understands that he's starting to hallucinate due to the lack of food and sleep and the long period he's spent in the jungle. The next day, Yossi notices swelling on his head and feels intense pain. He uses his medical kit to clean the swelling, but to his shock, a large worm crawls out of his forehead. He forces himself to keep moving, and soon, he finds a chopped-down tree in the jungle, which gives him hope that there might be other people nearby. He also finds a nest full of eggs under a tree, and due to his severe hunger, he has no choice but to eat them. Finally, Yossi reaches the tribal area he's been aiming for, but he's devastated to discover that all their tents and homes have been destroyed in what seems to have been an attack, and there's not a single person left. Feeling crushed, he decides to change his plan and continue toward the next tribe, even though it's far away. He knows he can't make it because of the serious leg injuries he sustained from walking nonstop for days. In that moment, Yossi feels Marcus's pain and guilt, thinking they didn't sense his suffering and blamed him for his injuries and separation. He wishes Marcus were there so he could apologize to him. As daylight breaks, despite Yossi's injuries, he has no choice but to continue toward the tribe. He finds footprints along the way, and once again, his hope returns. However, he's shocked to realize he's standing in the exact spot he was yesterday and that the footprints are his own. Yossi becomes frustrated, feeling trapped in a cycle he can't escape. He remembers his father's words when he opposed Yossi's idea of traveling, even punishing him by refusing to give him any money from his fortune. At that moment, Yossi regrets not listening to his father, realizing that his stubbornness and desire for adventure have left him stranded in the jungle. As Yossi makes the decision to keep going, a sudden rainstorm forces him to take shelter under a tree until the rain subsides. Once it does, he can move again. Yossi falls asleep and dreams of his life in America before his journey, remembering the luxury he once lived in. With the dawn, we see a hunter and his son walking toward the river. They're shocked to find Yossi unconscious on the shore, completely exhausted. They immediately take him to their tribe and begin treating his wounds. After a few days, when Kevin regains his strength and consciousness, he contacts the local police in the tribe and asks for help to search for his missing friend, Yossi, in the jungle. The officer agrees to help, sending Kevin in a plane to monitor the jungle from above. At the same time, Yossi sees the plane and tries to wave and shout, but because the plane is too high, Kevin can't see him. When Kevin returns to the tribe, he tells the officer that he couldn't search for his friend properly because of the plane's altitude. He asks for help to search by the river, but the officer refuses, convinced that Yossi is dead since it's been 3 weeks since he went missing in the jungle. However, Kevin is certain that Yossi is still alive and insists on rescuing him. The officer directs him to a skilled hunter who knows every corner of the jungle. When Kevin asks the hunter for help, he initially refuses, but Kevin's determination leads him to decide to buy a boat from the hunter and go on his own. Seeing Kevin's resolve, the hunter finally agrees to help him, and they begin their journey to find Yossi. During this time, Yossi has all but given up, drained of energy. Suddenly, he hears the sound of someone crying nearby. When he investigates, he finds a lost girl, which gives him hope again. He reassures her and tells her that he'll get her back to her tribe. Along the way, he talks to her even though she doesn't understand his language. Still, he feels comforted to finally have human contact after 3 weeks alone in the jungle. At nightfall, Yossi tells the girl to sleep, promising to protect her and continue their journey at dawn. She falls asleep beside him, but when he wakes up, she's gone. He realizes that she was never there and that he's back to hallucinating again. The next day, while continuing his journey, Yossi falls into a mud pit. With no energy left, he's unable to help himself out of it. Exhausted, he falls asleep and dreams of his uncle giving him a Bible to protect him. When he wakes up, he gathers the last of his strength, grabs onto a tree branch, and pulls himself out of the mud. He notices a tree nearby filled with fire ants, and he comes up with a plan: to let the ants sting him all over his body, hoping that the pain will give him enough energy to keep moving. He puts his plan into action, allowing the ants to crawl over him and bite him. Yossi runs until he finally reaches the shore, where he uses pieces of wood to create a signal for any passing hunters. The next day, Kevin reaches the shore and spots the signal Yossi made, but he can't find Yossi himself. Feeling defeated, Kevin starts to accept that his friend may have died. He decides to return to the tribe with the hunter. At the same time, Yossi hears a sound coming from the shore, where he's lying beneath a tree nearby. He tries to call out to Kevin, but he's too weak. Yossi stands on the shore, watching the boat in defeat. Just then, Kevin spots him standing there, and tells the hunter to turn the boat around quickly. Finally, Kevin finds his friend Yossi after 19 days of being lost in the jungle. Kevin clings to Yossi as if he's come back to life, thanking him for keeping his promise and saving him. They return together to the tribe, which celebrates Yossi's rescue and welcomes him warmly. Yossi and Kevin head back to the city, hoping to reunite with Marcus and Carl, but they're shocked to find out that the two never made it to the city. Despite searching for weeks, they couldn't find any trace of them, nor had anyone seen them. When they consult the police, they're stunned to learn that Carl was wanted by the authorities for misleading tourists. In the end, Carl and Marcus remain missing to this day. And that's how our movie ends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.